So this is what it looks like when you watch Starship Troopers think the Terran Empire is based, and then realize they're the baddies. Starship Troopers is making the rounds on Twitter because a bunch of people of no particular political persuasion are butthurt that the movie is a satire about views all of them claim they don't hold. Before it started trending, I first caught wind of it with a series of tweets by some author named Isaac Young. They are just magnificent. There's so much finely cut copium in his 7 tweets, I want to bottle it and sell it at the presidential election. From the first hit, it's a quality high. Quote, "Why the first Starship Troopers movie failed as a parody, a thread." Well, Young's first problem is that the movie isn't a parody. It's a satire. Satires don't have to be funny. Look at movies like RoboCop, Get Out, Planet of the Apes, American Psycho, and the quintessential satire, 1984. They may have funny parts in them, but they aren't always comedies. Starship Troopers leans into both the serious and humorous. It's not trying to make you laugh, but it is trying to make you smile at the ridiculous nature of the characters, the situation, and the politics in the story. That seemed to bother Isaac Young. Quote, "Watching the movie, it was clear the director was aiming for a campy, over-the-top depiction of the Terran Federation. Perhaps not an outright mockery, but certainly a drastic departure from the serious novel. Director Paul Verhoeven and screenwriter Edward Neumeier are known for their over-the-top tone. Think of RoboCop, their previous film together. That movie is anything but subtle. Verhoeven is also on record saying that he viewed the novel as fascistic, militaristic, and totalitarian, and used the film as a way to critique those ideas. I haven't read Heinlein's book. I got about 20 pages in before I lost interest, so I don't know how fair that criticism is. I have seen the movie many times, and I found it to be a decent commentary on the flaws of militarism, fascism, and xenophobia. It's not the most thorough deconstruction of those ideas, but it does get you through the door. That said, if the film's take is tonally different from the novel, I can see how that would bother fans of the book. He goes on, quote, "First, let's tackle a writing pitfall that irks leftists to this day. If you make your characters naturally handsome, fit, and well-groomed, then it becomes increasingly difficult to properly mock them. No, it doesn't. Just because someone is beautiful doesn't mean they're good. In fact, this theme appears throughout scores of stories in many cultures. There are many stories where the villain is a pretty one and uses their beauty to play on people's tendency to associate attractiveness with goodness. Beauty and the Beast comes to mind. So when Young says, quote, "Beauty is self-evident, and all the characters in ST are good-looking," all he's revealing is his own bias, probably based on his politics and religion given that dig at the left. I checked. He's a right-wing Catholic. Young believes that beauty is self-evident, and so falsely assumes everyone shares his views. That's not how reality works. Just because Young believes that all that glitters is gold doesn't mean the rest of us fall for that nonsense. But we should thank Young for letting us know that all it takes to get him to go along with bad ideas and terrible actions is a pretty face. He continues, quote, "This extends to the overall Terran Federation as well. We see clean, beautiful streets. Life seems good for Rico and his polite high school. This is a far cry from the crime-ridden and drug-addicted cities we know today. Where are the homeless encampments? The ghettos?" In context to the film, those people probably wouldn't be allowed to live very long. There's a newsreel clip promoting a live feed of a convicted murderer's execution on all channels. It's implied that he was tried, convicted, and executed on the same day. This isn't a society that tolerates the dredges. It gets rid of them. Again, this is based on the context of the film. Nothing about the society seems to allow for ne'er-do-wells. The other thing to keep in mind is that the Terran Federation is meant to be a utopia. A fascist, militaristic, right-wing utopia, but a utopia nonetheless. So why would Young expect to see the homeless in ghettos in a utopia? Utopias typically don't depict the negative aspects of society. It seems like Young is again showing his hand, as he does here. Quote, "Can we nail the Terran Federation for being cruel? I guess. But when you play off cruelty as a joke, you're undermining your own message. This isn't a dialogue about the brutal conditions for training soldiers in a futuristic setting. This is a gag, and it's hilarious." To Young, yes, maybe because Young doesn't realize that two things can be true at the same time. The film can make fun of those situations and use that mockery as a critique by pointing out the situation's absurdity and cruelty. This might prove a better tool in dissuading people from lionizing such a culture than playing it serious and hoping people would dislike it, especially if they'd only guess that it was cruel. After all, the filmmakers might encounter people who would be unmoved by a clear-cut message, such as not judging others by their appearance. Quote, Alright, what about the critique of comparison? Perhaps the enemies of the Terran Federation have a better system. Oh wait, no, they're bugs. I've seen people genuinely argue that the bugs are supposed to be sympathetic, but they're still bugs. Yes, that's why Neumeier chose them. Apparently his wife isn't a fan of bugs. Many people, myself included, find insects repulsive, so using them as aliens easily brings out people's disgust response. If you wanted to play on people's kill-em-all tendencies, which Neumeier wanted to do, bugs are a perfect way of doing this, especially if people have political and religious beliefs that shore up their negative reaction. Quote, "This is not a face I can relate to, sympathize for, or even have a dialogue with. This screams at me to kill it with fire. Even if I didn't want to kill this thing, I want to be in orbit, far away from this creature. It's horrific, and only a contrarian can argue against it." How very Christian of you. And here I thought Catholics were taught to love all of God's creations. If ever you wanted to see how easily people can think other people deserve to die just because they're different, remember Isaac Young's comment. That's how fast that happens. That's how easily people rationalize it. And he hasn't even brought in his religion yet. That would make it much worse, so much faster. Now listen, I am not a fan of bugs at all. I don't want them near me, on me, or in my house. However, that doesn't change that some of them might turn out to be intelligent. And if they are, people, other people, not me, should look into that. If it turned out to be an alien species, I would try to move past my disgust of them to find out how the hell they were able to get to our planet. My curiosity would trump my fear and disgust. I'd also understand that they might think of us what we think of them, so it'd be to our mutual advantage to let that go so we don't kill each other. The film doesn't say how humans and bugs came to fight, but it does imply that humans started the conflict. And throughout the film, we're shown that everyone, including children, are taught to hate bugs simply because they're different. The entire conflict could have started simply because humans saw something they didn't like and tried to kill it. Now look at what that's caused. Both sides are trying to wipe each other out of existence. The entire plotline is a warning about why you shouldn't have the kill 'em with fire response. Using something people find repulsive is a great way of showing how easily people can fall into that mentality. That Young considers it contrarian to disagree with his position only proves how dangerous this mentality can be, because it clearly hasn't occurred to him that the bugs probably think the same thing about humans, that we're horrific, and they want to be as far from us as possible. And if they can't be, then they want to kill us with fire, or in their case, they're explosive shitballs. And for those who might claim that the bugs are just killing machines, I would remind them that that is exactly how humans are presented in the film. They're trained to kill without remorse. Anything that looks like a bug dies. No questions asked. We're shown the brain bug sucking out that one guy's brain, and we're meant to be horrified by that. Then 15 minutes later, we're shown humans doing the same thing to the brain bug, but it's shown as propaganda that humans are finally winning. For all the violence the bugs commit, humans do the same thing. The Terran Federation is just as much the baddies as the bugs. They just look prettier doing it. Isaac Young then wraps up with this, quote, "The only thing you can really critique about the Terran Federation is the propaganda and incompetence. But when everything is so slapstick, it fails at landing a serious point. These guys are badasses in a funny movie, not a warning about the dangers of fascism." Here's what I think. Young doesn't have a problem with the Terran Federation. In fact, Young probably believes it's based. His problem is that by making fun of it, the filmmakers reveal that society is farcical, authoritarian, jingoistic, and idiotic, and there's no way for Young to defend it, no matter how cool and pretty he thinks all the people are. So instead, he tries to claim that the film is too silly to act as a warning. That's a weak counterpoint easily revealed by flipping the script. Use humor and satire to point out the flaws and absurdities of, let's say, communism, and I doubt Isaac Young would claim that the black comedy and satire The Death of Stalin is too silly to be a substantive critique of the insanity of Stalin's Russia, even though the movie is hilarious. I don't think the problem for Young is the humor. I think his problem is that Starship Troopers critiques views he values, and that bothers him. So in his eyes, that makes the movie a failure. But if anything, the film over-succeeded in making this point. When it was released, it faced criticism claiming it endorsed fascism, militarism, and Nazism. Some people took the humor as a way of softening the hard edge of those ideas instead of pointing out their flaws. Like Isaac Young, people saw something and then reacted to it instead of taking the time to analyze the film and its themes and its message. They saw what they wanted to see and then trashed the film. And many of them didn't have the decency to admit later on that they got it wrong. There's nothing in the movie leading people to support fascism or totalitarianism. That said, if people are already leaning in that direction, they might miss the point and think the movie is based. This is why I think people should pay attention to these two different reactions, because this is what happens to many stories that critique the horrors of humanity. It doesn't take much for people to take the criticism the wrong way, or be offended, or miss the point entirely. And Isaac Young has the rare distinction of doing all three. It truly gives a new meaning to the word special. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.